Again, organizations like this, I think, are so crucial to the daily survival of not only the cancer, or the, I speak as cancer, but I know there's other terminal diseases.
Right.
It's not only important for that person dealing with that illness, but it's also important for the family
Absolutely.
that we have those kind of outlets. So
Sure.
we're just so thankful that, you know, we can be a part of what's happening with Treasure Time, and you know, we're going to do everything we can to be a part of promoting their brand and their message, because it's such a great thing to be doing. And, you know, hats off to Suzanne for even, you know, thinking to do this and,
Yes.
and getting this
Exactly.
underway.
Yes.
Although, you know, I have to say, when Ken and I met for the first time, and I went home after that meeting, and I was like, God, I'm blown away by this man. And I've been telling everybody this. I'm like, Ken is one of the most amazing people that I've ever met. Because you have this positive outlook, this positive vibe, and even though you're going through all of this, you've just got this amazing outlook. And it's incredible. And then when I said to Ken, you know, would you consider applying to be one of the families?
Mm-hmm.
And his response was, I'd rather you use that for somebody who needs it more than I do. Who says that? Like,
And what is more? I'm thinking, you know, it's like.
but just, you know,
Yeah, that's amazing.
that just says something about you as a person. Like, I'd rather give that to somebody who maybe can't afford to go on a trip together, or
Oh,
maybe
I see.
can't,
Right.
you know, it says a lot about you. And I tell people all the time that I just feel like we're so lucky to have you as a part of this, because it's just.
Now, Shauna, you were affected by cancer, so not
Yes.
directly, but your mom.
Sorry.
right?
Yes, I was. When I was about the age of 14, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she and my father did not want to trouble my brothers and I too early on before they realized the extent of it. So we did not find out until quite some time down the line,
Right.
when she had started the treatments for both radiation and chemotherapy. And through some time, the progression of the cancer got more so that everyone was made aware of the situation.
Right.
She, after undergoing some treatment, she did have a double mastectomy, and she did go into remission after a short time afterwards. And the remission lasted for a couple of years before it did return, and it hit her thyroids and then traveled, and eventually it was in the bones, and then unfortunately she did pass away when I was 19 years old of brain cancer. So she did suffer for quite some time, and she chose at the end not to continue treatment at Yale New Haven Hospital, but instead she decided she wanted to die with the family at home in the comfort of her own home.
Right.
And so we relied on hospice care to console not only my mother but the family.
Oh,
and
sure.
that was the wonderful thing about hospice, is that they're not only there to comfort the terminally ill, but also a very big part of the family. And they became part of our family
Right.
through the hard times and the suffering. And just as we suffered, they suffered with us.
Right.
And it was very touching to see such caring people in the healthcare field. And I myself decided to go into the nursing program at Griffin Hospital,
Oh, wow.
and I did the assistant nursing program. And I would really very much like to work in the hospice field.
Wow.
I think
Wow.
it really touched a special part of my heart, and
Sure.
I would like to very much be involved with the hospice care.
I can relate to what you're saying, Shauna, because I myself am a two-time cancer survivor
Yes.
and had a young daughter who had to adjust to her mother's cancer diagnosis and treatment, and that fear that we don't know what the future holds. And I think that what we do know is that cancer is a crisis for the whole family, and each person is going to cope and react in a different way, and we need to respect each person's individual coping style and really just wrap ourselves around them as they go through treatment.
Yes.
And just offer as much personalized, compassionate care as we can, whether they are in active treatment, whether they are receiving palliative care, whether they're a survivor, a thriving survivor,
Yes.
or hospice. And I think that's the most important thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you have siblings?
Yes, I have 2 younger brothers.
Okay,
And so at the time that my mother passed, I was 19. My middle brother was 18, and my youngest brother was not yet 15.
now, given that making you the oldest, did you feel sort of an added responsibility when all that was going on?
I did, actually. I had a very close relationship with my mother. And my father was more of a boy's dad.
Right, right.
And my mother and I was mommy's girl.
Right.
And during all of the years, even before she was sick, it was a very close relationship. And through the time that she was, towards the end, I think I spent some extra time with her.
Sure.
And, you're well aware of the situation.
Mhm.
And unfortunately for my little brother, I think that he was too young to realize, the end was near.
Right.
I did do a lot of research, so I was well aware of the 5 stages of
Right.
death at that time.
Right.
And I did a lot of reading on the stages. And I remember this one particular day, my mother was very bedridden for several weeks, possibly even into the months. And this one particular day, she got up out of nowhere and had this incredible burst of energy. And she wanted to cook for the whole family.
Wow.
And my aunt and uncle from New Jersey were visiting. And most of the people in the family were, including my brothers, I remember being very relieved. And I knew differently. So I took everything into stride for the whole day. She was up and cooking for everybody and having a wonderful time with the family, which was really an amazing day. And I think it was towards the end of the day, she said, I felt tired, and she went back into bed. And I knew that was part of the stage. So that was the I don't know what they call it exactly. There's a specific name. It's an energy.
A rally.
A rally.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And again, it's part of the stages. So I was well aware of what was happening. And in fact, the day that she did pass away, my aunt and uncle from New Jersey were visiting, and my uncle had to return back to work. And that very day, the Pope was in New Jersey. And he had to return. My aunt and uncle had tickets to see the Pope, but they refused to stay with my mother, obviously. And we were all by her bedside, and we knew it was approaching. So we're all with her. And the moment she passed, my uncle called and said, "Is Margaret still with us?" So he somehow knew, he knew. And it was very touching to know that we were all united like that,
Sure. And it's interesting, we've mentioned, like, as far as the treatment, people think of, like, first of all, they think of cancer for what it is, kind of taking over your body, and not to equate this at all, I think, to what everyone's talked about here so far, but my last dog got diagnosed, so, and then obviously it was my boy, I guess you could say. And the difference is, it was only about 2 weeks from the time diagnosis to where it had progressed so far we had to euthanize him. But and that was 2 weeks. You're talking about doing research. I was online, constantly trying to find out and learning all about and talking to people, humans, about other humans or about pets, things like that. Started out with other pets and cancer, and then just finding out all this, like you were saying, this alternate universe. Like it's like all of a sudden, this is what you suddenly are now living your life with all these terminology, all this technology, day-to-day treatment, like, oh, yep, got up and, or people, like, similar to people who have to go on dialysis or any kind of, like, ongoing treatment. It just becomes part of, like, brushing your teeth.
Yeah.
And, but the thing that I remember hearing most often was, there's scientifically what the cancer does to your body, compared to, but then when you compare that to the treatment and the chemo, and it's actually the treatment that is more wearing and taxing on people than, let's say, the cancer. Obviously, cancer is progressing and eventually will take over if you don't treat it. But I've had some family members since then, and that's what's and then, like you said, if it's wearing on you and you're sort of, let's say, the rock of the family, whether it's mom or yourself and things like that, that's going to make, that's going to have far-reaching effects. It's like all of a sudden the person who kind of oversaw what was going on, or at least was a key contributor in the family and things like that, is no longer at 100%.
Cancer is personal. It
Yeah,
affects all
exactly,
of us.
exactly.
Ourselves,
Right.
our family members,
Absolutely.
our friends, our dear friends,
Right.
our neighbors.
And now really even the community. I mean, when you look at this, you look at what Treasure Time is doing or what Griffin Hospital, Griffin Hospital is a key facet of the Valley community. So, whether you have, it's almost like when they say when people who move to a town and it's like, even if you don't have kids, the school system affects your taxes, it affects things, so there's this entity going on about treating, life-threatening illnesses that is affecting everybody, whether they're directly related or indirectly. It's like 7 degrees of separation. It's like, however, some way you either know somebody or in your community is being affected by it.
And it's so sad because it really does seem like everybody I talk to nowadays has it
Yeah.
or knows somebody who has it or.
Well, I interviewed
awful.
Dr. Schwartz in Ansonia, who's a gastroenterologist, and he said it's interesting what's happening. Why that, or at least one theory why that is because the diagnosis techniques are getting better. So all these cancers were probably out there, but we just didn't know. But now we have better ways of finding them. But then, of course, now you have more people that you have to treat. But those are hopefully getting better as well. But that's part of the reason. It's not necessarily, in other words, some of it is due to the fact that, maybe because of chemicals or, things in our food. There might be chemical reasons or biological reasons why it's happening, but there's just the fact that it might be the exact same number of cancer patients out there, but we used to go 1 out of 10, and now we can, with a colonoscopy, we can do 6 out of 10 and find it and address it early and things like that.
And I think, and there's so many more testing. I mean, I know for me personally, my mother is a breast cancer survivor.
Right.
And so when I found out that my mother had breast cancer, what's the first thing you do? You're like, oh my God, am I gonna get it? Because I think as a child, that's where your mind goes.
Sure.
And so I immediately went and started finding out more information about the BRCA gene testing.
Yes. Mhm.
And you know what, and the ladies at Seymour Pink mentioned to me that only 1 out of 10 it was in a genetic situation. I thought it was like pretty much you're at least more predisposed than not if like your mom has it. No, it's actually they've done testing now. There's other contributing factors besides
Right.
family. Well, that's the genetic testing, and we got into there's genetic testing and family history. Now, your family history, think about it. You have your genes, but also your environment. Where you grow up. You could all be in the same family, but maybe the dynamic, like if you're the eldest child versus the youngest child, you pretty much have the same, from mom and dad, same genetic makeup, but, the stress that she was under, maybe having to look after her brothers, is different, so. But
Well, it's also your background.
Right,
So it was
exactly.
kind of funny because when I went to look into the testing, they said you have to have, a certain number of I can't think of the word, but like there's certain things that they have to find in your background
Right.
for them to even cover the test. So what I found was really interesting was that for me, because my mother had breast cancer,
Right.
was actually not that big of a deal. If it was my mother and my aunt and,
Oh,
my
I see.
cousin,
Oh, I
then but there had to be like more than one instance.
Right.
But the reason it was covered for me was because of my background.
Oh.
My Jewish, it's,
Ethnicity.
there's a particular type,
Right,
but of my Jewish heritage.
right, okay.
And we do offer genetic counseling right at the Center for Cancer Care, so people do not have to travel.
And that's where I had
They
it done.
can- Yes,
Okay.
they can have it convenient and close to home. And that is an important piece of what we offer now. I think the key is to realize that anyone who's going through cancer needs a multidisciplinary approach. So they need not only physicians and nurses and technicians, social workers, chaplains. They need a whole team of people working with them.
Right.
And in terms of children of people who are going through cancer treatment, we also offer cancer care support programs. They offer a wonderful array of services in particular for children whose parents are undergoing cancer treatment. And we try to make our families aware of those services as well. Not everyone is in the same place. So there are families who prefer not to mention the word cancer to their children.
Mhm.
And I think we have to be respectful, and I think Suzanne in Treasured Time is understanding of this and very sensitive to this, that each family handles this differently.
Mhm.
And we need to respect and start where they're at in terms of how they'd like to approach supporting their children and just getting through this very, very tough experience.
I think as Donna had said, you have to respect the fact that some families are going to deal differently with this that when they have children. In our situation, we have a 6-year-old and a 16-year-old.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you know, they both know that dad has cancer. The 6-year-old, we keep him out of most of the conversations.
Sure.
We talk periodically about it, you know, when we have our time together, we will talk about it and we pray about it as a family and so on.
Right.
You know, the 16-year-old she's a young lady becoming a young
Right.
adult, and so she understands obviously more what's going on. But I think it's important that no matter whether you're public about it, you know, you have to have I think, this is my personal opinion, that you should have conversations, open conversations with your children,
Mhm.
so that they're able to deal with this in the way they deal with it.
Right.
But be very cognizant of the fact that depending upon their age, they're going to deal with it very differently.
Right.
But we choose to really make this a family challenge, if you will,
Mhm.
in that we want our kids to know.
Sure,
And,
sure.
but obviously, like I said, we decide not to give as much information to the 6-year-old as
yeah,
to the
of
16-year-old.
Of course.
But I think along the way, if, you know, and I could be healed from this, I could die from this. But again, either way, you've got to take it day by day. And I think as part of the process, you have to have your family along for the journey so that if in fact it does take my life, the journey is easily, I guess, better understood
Sure.
and they can cope with it better.
Plus, it's gradual. Can you imagine if you're
Yeah,
not really
exactly.
connected, and all of a sudden it's
Exactly.
like, where's that? I mean,
Yeah.
that'd be the worst situation. But
Yeah.
so you're kind of, at least it's a incremental, whether it's incremental improvement or incremental decline,
Right.
the family's involved. It's just, and they
Yep.
know, and it's sort of like, stuff comes up, you know, the 6-year-old might say something, you know, it's not like all of a sudden everything comes out of their mouth when it's, you know, crunch time and things happen. So that just makes a lot of sense. It's
You
great.
know, we try to find the best. I was sharing with Donna, you know, I keep notes to myself, you know, I try to identify how cancer is a blessing to me. And I, you know, every time I think of something, I'll put it down, you know,
Right.
that cancer is a blessing because it makes you take life into perspective, where
Completely.
when you don't have something like this in your life, life just goes on and it's a blur.
Right, exactly.
You know, cancer's a blessing because it gives you a chance to say goodbye to people if in fact that's going to happen. Now, I don't look at my cancer as something that is definitively terminal.
Right.
I'm realistic to the fact that it can be,
Sure.
and, you know, maybe more than likely will be.
Right.
But I look at it as, okay, at least I have the chance to be able to deal with the fact that I might see something that could mean the end of my life, and so how am I going to deal with that as I deal with people that I know and love and people that I haven't talked to in a while? Or,
Right,
You know,
exactly.
I think things I used to get stressed out about, I don't get stressed about it anymore. You know, I look at things and I'm
Right,
like, is it
right.
really that important in the big
Exactly.
picture?
Yeah.
So I think in a lot of ways, if you can choose to look at your terminal disease as something that is a blessing, then it makes the journey easier.
I mean, all due respect to the organization you created, you are creating treasure time with your family. Is when I listen to what you're saying,
Yeah,
it's like your own version of what Suzanne's trying to do on a
yeah,
global
there's no doubt.
perspective.
And my wife is I'm a workaholic, and I actually work for me is therapy, and it helps me kind of, you know, think about other things and so on. But my wife keeps pulling me back in and says, listen, you know, we need to deal with this day to day. And again, I'm much more of an optimist. She's a little more of a pessimist, but we balance each other a little bit. And I commute to Pennsylvania, so I live
Oh, wow.
apart from my family 5 days a week on top of having this diagnosis. And so we have 48 hours together every weekend.
Wow.
And that's kind of hard to spread that between a 6-year-old, a 16-year-old, and
Oh,
a
yeah.
wife. but nonetheless, we try to, make every second count. And that's really what life should be all about. Even if we don't have a terminal illness, we should make every second count of every day. And again, that's why I think you can almost look at your terminal illness sometimes as a blessing, because it helps you truly realize that and put it into focus,
Right.
that you need to look at every minute of every day as a
Yeah.
blessing,
Yeah.
and make the most out of it, whatever that might mean in that moment. But we refuse to look to the future too much, because again,
Right.
it's fear and anxiety.
Sure.
And we're very spiritual. We don't, fear and anxiety is not of God.
Right.
And so, we just say, okay, it's in your hands, God, take it from here. We're gonna live each day just, how we think you want us to, and that's how we'll deal with life.
It's good. It seems to be working. I mean,
Yeah.
from your demeanor and how how you seem to cope with it. It's amazing, actually.
I told you.
It is. I mean, I would never know. I mean, I know people.
I look pretty good, don't I?
Very good, very good.
You would never know if you didn't tell somebody.
I mean, I think about, again, back to the Seymour Pink ladies, we had, Marcy was the one undergoing treatment, and if you watch those clips, you would just, and I'm sure if you just know her, you would never know that she's the one going through this stuff. She's just, everyone else was, but she's just like you were saying, don't sweat the small stuff kind of thing. You
Yeah.
can definitely feel like when you start going through something like that, it's like you can make jokes if you, misspeak, you're just like, whatever, and it's like, of course, it was great to listen to her, but it's just amazing that seems to be, the common factor, when you get to that point of, it's just like every single moment, but, these little things, don't worry
Yeah,
about it.
absolutely.
It's more about spending time with your kids. And I was thinking about when you said you're commuting to Pennsylvania, how are you you're undergoing treatment now?
Right, I have not, at this point, I was diagnosed in January of 2012.
Okay.
I've not undergone any kind of drug therapy. I've had 3 surgeries.
Oh, okay.
And
So
I've
it's
had various parts
isolated.
of my body removed, but I haven't had any drug therapy. So I will now start in the middle of March with a immunotherapy at Johns Hopkins.
Okay.
And I think, that starts another chapter in the journey.
Sure.
Because, to this point, it's been surgery,
Right.
and I felt good, I do feel good. I can deal well with surgical pain, but as I was telling Donna earlier, I think the struggle for me is I don't deal well necessarily with the feeling of not feeling good a lot.
Right,
And I'm,
right.
and this may be something that happens with these drugs, but okay, we're gonna deal with that as it
Right,
comes. I'm not
right.
gonna worry about it now because it's not
Exactly.
happening now, and there's
Right.
nothing I can do about it.
Right.
It is what it is. It's what's gonna happen is gonna happen, and it's gonna be better because of the attitude that I'll have going through it.
That's
And
right.
you just say,
You've
okay.
almost been rehearsing for that situation
Yeah.
because you're like, well, hey,
Yeah.
this is how we're dealing with it when it's at this level, and we'll just, modify it or adapt that same approach.
Yeah, for those people that have cancer, they understand this terminology that I learned. It's called scanxiety. Right as you get closer to your scan dates, you have this scanxiety, you have this anxiety
Right, right.
about what's going to happen. And then once you get by that, no matter what it is, you just find a way to cope with whatever the result is. You're stable, you've progressed, whatever. And then you get back to leading a normal life. So for anybody that's watching that's dealing with that, again, it's not necessarily a death sentence. You have to realize that, you're going to have to cope with it, and life is going to go on for at least a little bit of time, and deal with it the best that you can. But that's where you got to reach out and not be afraid to share with people and talk to people and, research. Knowledge is power. I mean, when you
Right,
go to
that's
an
right.
oncologist to deal with this type of cancer, you're thinking, well, I'm dealing with an oncologist, they should know everything. Well, there's a lot of things that are happening that maybe they don't know, or, maybe they should know, and talk to them about that.
I mean, a lot of what they know is because of prior patients telling them what they're
Yeah,
going through. So
right.
you're the next source of data for
Right,
their
and Donna and I
information.
were talking about this, and she asked me this question just a few days ago on network television. They did a story about how a research, and he's not even a doctor, I don't believe, he's not a physician.
Right.
They found this gentleman who had a terminal cancer, and they have taken a fruit fly and recreated the diabetes that he has and the tumor that he has, the cancer he has, in this fruit fly.
Oh
my
And then
gosh.
they are experimenting with all different types of
Wow.
drugs, not even some that are necessarily cancer drugs, to determine how they, could
Right.
help
Wow.
this fruit fly.
So it's kind of
And
like
so-
parallel while he's being.
Yeah,
treated.
and they've
Oh my
actually
God.
found
That's
a
amazing.
cocktail of
That's crazy.
drugs that
I
have
know.
reduced the tumor in the fruit fly that they're now put this man on. So there's always the hope. And that's the key. You have to keep hope that, something's going to happen,
Right.
divine intervention
Yeah,
or
exactly.
some kind of, miracle drug that's going to happen or whatever that just keeps you going. And that's what you got to look at. You got to just keep going, keep going, keep going, not worry about when am I going to die? Am I going to die? You can't,
Right, right.
there's no benefit in dealing with
Now,
something
you
like
do,
this.
I'm sure at times though, you do get those thoughts.
Oh,
right?
you get
So-
those thoughts.
So what do you do in that situation? I mean, when that, as opposed to, it's like saying, it's gonna happen. Let's say- let's
I
say
tell
you-
my,
what do you-
I tell myself not to think those things. And again, and I'm not gonna try to get too spiritual, but we are
It's
very
okay.
spiritual
No,
in
no,
our
that's
family,
okay.
and I believe that fear and anxiety, the devil can't take my soul, so he's gonna try to take my hope. And if you let the things of what I believe are, the devil,
Right.
fear, anxiety, all those type of things, they're not of anybody's God.
Right.
Okay,
right.
whatever God you believe in, that they're not of your God. And so if you let the devil creep in like that, which is exactly what the devil wants, then you're gonna go down a road you don't wanna go. So
Sure.
I'll pray, I'll think of positive things, and I just get it out of my mind. You know,
Ken, I think one of the hardest things about cancer is you have a sense of a loss of control. And people tell me that all the time. The hardest thing is to not have a sense of control.
And I believe that, and I think that's so true, and I think that from my spiritual standpoint, God wants me to have a loss of control because God wants me to give everything that's wrong and happening to me to Him. And I believe that, and I have found unbelievable comfort in being able to say, okay, God, you know what? You've allowed me in this situation for a reason. You've told me you'd never give me anything more than I can handle. So you know what? I'm just going to give it to you, and I'm going to live my life daily, and I'm going to just, let you take care of it. And the peace I have found through that could never have been given to me by any person or anything other than that. So for me and my family, spirituality is huge for us. In the battle, or in this journey, if you will.
And there's actually science behind that. I mean, I'm just from various things, chronic things that I've gone through. I've had friends of mine who are spiritual by nature say, and they're always like, well, you're the science guy. It's like, do you know there are papers that document, people who pray will heal, not, we were talking about, feel more optimistic just from prayer. And part of it, I was thinking about, well, I mean, obviously you're praying with your family, but typically a lot of it is, going out to church or temple or something like that. And right there, that actually makes sense because then you're going to be socializing, then you're going to be around other people, so that's going to help you definitely lower your anxiety. But he said, yeah, there's science behind the kind of, what seems to be a very non-scientific approach to healing. And it's just, so it just makes, again, puts a different perspective.
Also, I think it's also healing that the way you are about it, and that you do have this positive outlook, and that you do talk about it. I mean, you're here with us today to talk about what you're experiencing, and so you might be able to help somebody else
Exactly. And
by
that-
being here and talking about what you're dealing with.
And that's my hope anytime I talk about it. And I try to talk about it as much as I can because I truly believe that, even if you can just in a conversation can touch one person and give them some hope in dealing with whatever situation they're dealing with. I mean, I've had people tell me that don't even have an illness, gosh, Ken, what you've said, just makes me want to punch myself because I'm like so selfish about the way I think and look at what you're going
Or
through.
why
look at
wait
your
till you're in your
attitude.
situation to cherish every moment
Yeah.
with your
Exactly.
family.
Right.
Exactly.
If you have any comments on the show, feel free to provide feedback, questions, or suggestions to lookingupvalley@gmail.com or check out our Facebook page and dedicated website. Thank you very much.